Why does it feel like Cleveland is always searching for a quarterback, even when one is right in front of them? The noise coming out of Ohio lately has fans confused. On one side, you've got people saying the Browns need to explore every option. On the other, you've got a young quarterback who just put up elite numbers and hasn't even been given a real runway yet. So why is there even a debate? Reports and rumors have started floating around that Cleveland could look at other names, including Malik Willis. Some analysts say competition is healthy. Others suggest the team still isn't fully convinced about committing long-term. But here's the thing, if you strip away the headlines and speculation, what are we actually looking at? Because this isn't just about bringing in a backup, it's about what that move would signal. Is this a front office hedging its bets? Is it media-driven pressure? Or is Cleveland once again falling into the same pattern that's haunted them for years, never fully committing to one direction? Fans have noticed. They're asking why certain quarterbacks get handed the keys immediately while others are told to earn it over and over again. And when you start digging into the numbers, the conversation shifts fast. The stats tell one story, the narratives tell another. And once you see the full picture, you might start wondering if this debate was ever about performance in the first place. Cleveland doesn't just have a quarterback problem, it has a quarterback history. For years, the Cleveland Browns have been stuck in a cycle that feels impossible to escape. Draft a guy, hype him up, give him a short leash, move on, repeat. Fans have watched this story unfold over and over again, and every offseason it feels like the same headline: Cleveland searching for answers under center. Ownership pressure hasn't helped. Since the Haslams took control, expectations have been sky high, but stability at quarterback has been anything but. Big trades, big contracts, big promises, and yet the long-term solution always seems just out of reach. Then came the massive gamble on Deshaun Watson, a move that was supposed to end the carousel once and for all. Instead, injuries, inconsistency, and off-field controversy created even more uncertainty. Now the front office is in a tricky position. They can't afford to miss again, and that pressure changes everything. Because when a franchise has been burned this many times, hesitation creeps in. Even when there's a promising young quarterback in the building, doubt lingers. Is he really the guy? Should they bring in competition? Should they hedge their bets? That's where the latest rumors start to make sense. When reports suggest Cleveland could explore other quarterback options, it's not happening in a vacuum. It's happening inside a franchise that's been conditioned to second-guess itself. A team that's terrified of committing too early and equally terrified of waiting too long. But here's the twist: sometimes constant searching creates more instability than clarity. And if Cleveland isn't careful, they might be repeating the very pattern that's kept them stuck for years. Because the moment you start looking over your shoulder at the next option, you risk never fully investing in the one you already have. And that's exactly where this story starts to heat up. And then the rumor hit, and that's when everything shifted. Over the past few weeks, reports have suggested that Cleveland could explore bringing in Malik Willis. Nothing official, nothing confirmed, but enough buzz started circulating that fans immediately took notice. Some insiders framed him as one of the more intriguing names available. Others described him as a low-risk option with upside. But the moment the idea of pairing him with the Browns surfaced, the conversation exploded. Because here's the question nobody can ignore: what would that actually mean? If the front office brings him in strictly as a backup, that's one thing. Every young quarterback benefits from depth in the room. Competition can sharpen focus. But when talk starts including numbers like $15–20 million per year, fans start reading between the lines. That doesn't sound like standard backup insurance. That sounds like hesitation. And hesitation is what has Cleveland fans on edge. Malik Willis has shown flashes. When he stepped in for Green Bay during injury stretches, there were moments where he looked composed and athletic. Some analysts say he just hasn't had the right opportunity yet. Others argue the sample size is too small to make any bold claims. The truth probably sits somewhere in the middle. But the timing of this rumor is what makes it feel bigger than it might actually be. Because when a team is publicly saying they want to develop a young quarterback, yet rumors of outside options start surfacing, it sends a message, intentional or not. It suggests uncertainty. It suggests a front office that may not be fully sold. And once fans sense that doubt, the conversation stops being about depth charts and starts becoming about belief. Is this just smoke? Is it leverage? Or is Cleveland quietly preparing a backup plan in case things don't go perfectly? Whatever the answer is, the rumor alone was enough to light a fire. And once that fire started, people began digging into the numbers, and that's where the debate really took off. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Because once you move past the rumors and the speculation, you're left with something much simpler: the resume. Not opinions, not projections, just production. At Liberty, Malik Willis had a strong senior season, around 2,800 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, roughly 60% completion, solid numbers, playmaker ability, dual threat upside. That's what helped him climb draft boards. But when you line that up next to Shedeur's final college season, the gap jumps off the screen. Over 4,100 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, completion percentage hovering around 74%. That's not just good, that's elite efficiency. That's operating at a completely different level of precision. And it didn't happen against random competition. It came against Power 5 defenses week after week. That difference matters. Because when analysts talk about upside, fans start asking why proven production suddenly becomes secondary. If one quarterback completed nearly 3/4 of his passes while carrying a high-volume offense, why is the narrative still centered on whether he needs to prove himself? And here's the part that really fuels debate: context. Shedeur wasn't just putting up empty stats in blowouts. He was often playing behind an offensive line that struggled at times. He was taking hits. He was extending plays. He was asked to carry the offense, and despite that, the efficiency never collapsed. Meanwhile, Willis was viewed more as a traits-based prospect: big arm, mobility, raw potential. But raw is the key word there: developmental, long-term project. So when rumors surface suggesting Cleveland could prioritize one over the other, fans don't see it as depth, they see it as a contradiction. Because if resumes still matter, the production gap isn't subtle, it's significant. And once that comparison started spreading online, the narrative began shifting fast, because college numbers were only the beginning of the debate. But college production is only half the story. Because once a quarterback steps into the NFL, everything speeds up, windows get tighter, pass rushes get faster, and potential either starts turning into performance or it stalls. Malik Willis has had opportunities at the next level. Not a full season, not a long leash, but chances nonetheless. In his early starts, the stat lines were modest: limited passing yards, few touchdowns, conservative play calling. In some games, the offense clearly leaned on the run game to protect him. That's not unusual for a young quarterback, but it does show that coaches were managing the situation carefully. There was one stretch with Green Bay where he looked more composed. A few flashes, better rhythm, and supporters point to that sample as proof that he just needs stability. That development takes time, that raw traits can eventually translate. And that argument isn't unreasonable. But here where things get interesting. When analysts discuss Willis, the tone is often about projection, what he could become. When they discuss Shedeur, the tone shifts toward evaluation, what he must prove. That contrast hasn't gone unnoticed by fans. Because in the NFL, production matters, efficiency matters, decision-making matters. And while Willis has tools, his body of work at the pro level is still limited and uneven. That doesn't mean he can't improve, it simply means the resume is still forming. Meanwhile, when a team signals even slight uncertainty about its current young quarterback while entertaining outside options, it creates tension, not necessarily because of talent gaps, but because of timing. If Cleveland truly believes in its developmental plan, why even flirt with alternatives so early? And if they're exploring every option, what does that say about their confidence? That's the reality check. This isn't about disrespecting one player, it's about understanding trajectories. One quarterback is still being defined by upside, the other is being questioned despite high-level production. And once you zoom out, the debate stops being about stats and starts becoming about belief. And then another stat quietly started making the rounds, one that added even more fuel to the fire. Touchdown passes against teams with winning records. On the surface, it sounds simple, but context is everything. When you narrow performance down to games against teams over .500, you're essentially isolating how a quarterback performs when the competition stiffens. when the defenses are disciplined, when mistakes get punished. In that comparison, Shedeur had more regular season touchdown passes against winning teams than Drake May. Not by a massive margin, but enough to spark conversation. And once fans noticed it, the question became obvious. If performance against stronger competition matters, why is that being emphasized more? Drake May was widely projected as a top-tier prospect. Analysts praised his arm strength, mobility, and frame. He was viewed as a long-term franchise quarterback almost by default. That narrative stuck early and it rarely wavered. But when similar efficiency metrics and situational stats show up for someone else, the scrutiny feels different. Now, to be fair, touchdown totals alone don't define a quarterback. Supporting cast, game flow, coaching philosophy, all of it factors in. But in debates where small details shape perception, these numbers carry weight. And here's what makes it interesting. When May's development is discussed, it's framed as growth potential. When Shedeur's numbers are brought up, the conversation often shifts to system quarterback or needs to adjust. That contrast in tone hasn't gone unnoticed. Is it draft position bias? Is it pre-draft narrative momentum? Or is it simply that once a label gets attached early, it's hard to shake? Because if we're evaluating fairly, situational production against winning teams should matter across the board. It shouldn't selectively count for one player and not the other. And once that realization settles in, the debate stops being about one stat and starts being about consistency in evaluation. Which leads to a bigger question. Is this about who's better right now, or about who the league already decided to believe in? And this is where the conversation takes a sharp turn. Suddenly, the phrase "he needs to compete" starts getting repeated everywhere. On radio, on social media, in comment sections, it becomes the safe middle ground take. Sounds reasonable, sounds balanced. But when you slow it down, you have to ask, compete for what exactly? Every rookie quarterback technically competes. That's part of the NFL. But not every rookie walks into a situation where their legitimacy is immediately questioned. Some are handed first-team reps from day one, some are publicly backed by coaches before training camp even begins. The message is clear: this is our guy. When that same level of public confidence isn't shown elsewhere, people notice. Now, to be fair, competition isn't a bad thing. Iron sharpens iron. A strong quarterback room can elevate everyone. But when the word competition feels less like development and more like doubt, it hits differently. Because here, what fans are picking up on the tone. When certain quarterbacks are drafted, the conversation is about building around them, protecting them, investing in their growth. When it comes to Shedeur, the conversation often pivots to whether he deserves the opportunity in the first place. That subtle shift changes everything. Is it about draft position? Possibly. Is it about expectations? Maybe. Or could it simply be that once a narrative forms early, it becomes harder to shake than the actual performance? And here's the bigger picture. If a team truly believes in its quarterback, the competition narrative doesn't dominate the headlines. Development does, vision does, confidence does. So when he needs to compete becomes the loudest storyline, it naturally raises eyebrows. Because in the NFL, belief from the organization can matter just as much as arm talent. And if that belief isn't crystal clear, the pressure doesn't just stay in the locker room, it spills into the entire fan base. Which leads to one final question. Is this about healthy competition or about hesitation disguised as fairness? And then came the quiet comment that changed the tone of everything. One analyst suggested something that didn't sound controversial at first: give Shedeur a full season. Let him take first-team reps, let him develop properly, and if it doesn't work, reset in the 2027 draft, which some reports claim could feature a strong quarterback class. On paper, that sounds logical, patient, strategic. But when you read between the lines, it feels different. Because what that suggestion really implies is this: we're not fully sure yet. It introduces a built-in escape hatch before the season even begins. And while that might be smart asset management from a front office perspective, it can feel like conditional support from a fan perspective. If a team truly believes it has found its franchise quarterback, the conversation isn't about the next draft class 2 years away. It's about building around the present. Now, to be fair, every organization thinks long-term. That's how smart franchises operate. You evaluate, you plan, you hedge, and given Cleveland's history at quarterback, caution isn't shocking. But the timing of that 2027 talk is what raises eyebrows. Why are we already discussing fallback plans? Is it simply responsible planning, or does it reflect lingering doubt inside the building? Some fans see it as healthy realism. Others interpret it as the organization keeping one foot out the door, and in the NFL, perception can quickly become reality. Because when a young quarterback hears that the next draft class is already being positioned as a safety net, the pressure multiplies. Every throw becomes a referendum. Every mistake becomes fuel for what's next conversations. And that's where this theory becomes more than just strategy, it becomes psychological. Are the Browns giving their quarterback a runway or a timer? If 2027 is already being whispered about, it tells us one thing for sure: this season won't just be about wins and losses. It'll be about belief. And belief in Cleveland has always been the most fragile part of the equation. So what does all of this actually mean for Cleveland? Because at some point, this stops being about stat lines, draft classes, or media takes. It becomes about identity, it becomes about direction. The Browns have spent years searching for stability at quarterback. Different systems, different coaches, different philosophies, and every time it feels like momentum is building, something resets the clock. That history matters. It shapes how fans react to even the smallest rumor. If Cleveland commits fully to Shedeur, it signals something powerful. It says, "This is our guy, we're building forward, not sideways." It creates clarity in the locker room. Players rally around certainty. Coaches design with conviction. That kind of alignment changes culture. But if the front office keeps floating alternatives, even subtly, the message becomes complicated. It suggests evaluation instead of investment. It signals caution instead of confidence. And in a league driven by belief, that difference is enormous. Now, none of this guarantees success. Quarterbacks develop at different speeds. Situations evolve, injuries happen, but what organizations can control is their posture. Are they decisive, or are they hedging? Because fans don't just react to wins and losses, they react to vision. They want to know the plan. They want to feel like the franchise isn't drifting between options. And here's the reality. If Shedeur gets the full opportunity and thrives, Cleveland finally stabilizes the most important position in sports. The noise disappears, the debates fade, the long search ends. But if doubt continues to surround him from day one, every incomplete pass will feel heavier than it should. Every rumor will feel louder. So this moment isn't just about one quarterback versus another. It's about whether Cleveland is ready to stop searching and finally choose. Because sometimes the biggest decision a franchise makes isn't about talent. It's about belief. At the end of the day, this entire debate comes down to something simple: production versus perception. Narratives are powerful. Once they start, they spread fast. One analyst questions upside, another suggests competition. A rumor surfaces about exploring other options, and before you know it, the conversation shifts away from what actually happened on the field. But numbers don't shift with opinions. Over 4,000 passing yards, nearly 40 touchdowns, completion percentage in the mid-70s, touchdowns against winning teams, efficiency under pressure. Those aren't projections, those aren't hypotheticals, those are results. That doesn't mean development is finished. It doesn't mean there aren't areas to grow. Every young quarterback has adjustments to make at the next level, but when production at that level already exists, the baseline is different. And that's what makes this moment so interesting for Cleveland. If the organization leans into belief, gives full first-team reps, and builds with clarity, the narrative could flip quickly. Success has a funny way of silencing doubt. One strong stretch of games, and suddenly the same voices questioning become the same voices praising. But if hesitation continues, if rumors keep surfacing, if competition becomes the headline instead of development, then the noise won't fade. It'll grow. Because fans see the numbers, they compare resumes, they notice tone differences in coverage, and they ask fair questions. Why is one quarterback labeled potential, while another with proven production is labeled uncertain? Maybe the answer unfolds this season, maybe it takes longer, but one thing is clear: this won't be decided by talk shows or draft projections. It will be decided on Sundays. And when it is, the stat sheet won't care about the narratives that came before it. So now the pressure shifts to Cleveland. Believe or second guess? Because eventually, the numbers always speak for themselves.